my name is Sarah. Today I'm going to be sharing with you the research that I did on American Horror Story and how it is redefining the standards of women in television. Just a little background on it. American Horror Story is an anthology horror television series that is on Channel FX in the United States. There are 5 seasons, all of which contain their own plot and resolution. Many of the actors and actresses, such as Jessica Lange, Evan Peters, Kathy Bates, Sarah Paulson, they are all on the show, and they play in different seasons, but they have different characters, and they're separate storylines. But producers Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk just released a statement saying that there's actually a connection between the seasons, and that's in development right now. So there's 18 actresses and 16 actors who play a variety of roles, and by this I mean like the main roles and supporting roles. The female cast members have been in more seasons than the male actors, not including Evan Peters and Dennis O'Hare, who plays a transvestite in American Horror Story Hotel and is probably the greatest performance ever. So you might wonder why I'm exploring American Horror Story. Well, this is a huge television show. It has won a number of Golden Globes, Emmys, other prestigious awards, and it's really popular, and it brings in millions of viewers every week. And the women on the show are often shown in roles of power, including Lady Gaga in the most recent Hotel series, Kathy Bates, Sarah Paulson, Jessica Lange. And in popular television, women are often not shown in roles of power, and even when they're often hypersexualized in order to get there. And because of the male gaze, a lot of popular television shows, women play the part of victim or sex toy or sidekick, and they don't get to be the protagonist. They're kind of just the side story. And American Horror Story is different because it's showing that women can be powerful, and they can, do things and be equal to men. So it's kind of changing the standards of female roles in popular television shows and showing that they can be badass and courageous and powerful. So some of my research questions for this were, are the females in the show predominantly good or evil characters? I did this because a lot of times, even when there are females in roles of power, they're kind of portrayed as bitchy or mean, and I wanted to see if the women who are in roles of power, if they're good or bad, because not every person that's a leader or in power is good. I mean, look at Vladimir Putin. So I wanted to look at that. I wanted to see if there were more female characters in roles of power than the male characters in the show. I wanted to see how the female characters in the show are portrayed as opposed to the males in the show, if they're hypersexualized, if they're victimized, things like that. And again, are the female characters hypersexualized in the show to kind of make up for them having power? So in order to reach the above objectives, my plan was to examine the lead and supporting characters of each season. I did a content analysis, and I did a color coding and symbol system to kind of record whether the characters were good or bad, if they were being hypersexualized. And when I say good or bad, this was kind of a subjective thing because everyone has their definitions of what's good and what's bad. What I kind of based it off of was a character was good if they put someone else before themselves, if they did a self-righteous act, if they their moral compass more or less showed through. And for the bad characters, it's if they manipulated people, killed, murdered, raped, abused, you name it. And the thing about this show that is so interesting is there's so much character development. So you'll see a lot of originally bad characters maybe have a change of heart, or vice versa. Some good characters just get sick of it all and go to the bad side or the dark side. So that's kind of how I examined that, and I went after all the characters and I separated it by seasons, and I really just went into depth and looked at the actions and the character development of the character throughout the season. So as I said before, I measured it on season, gender, whether the character was good, bad, or neutral, how they died, if they killed anyone, if their character was powerful or weak. And by powerful, I mean, did they have clear authority through the season? Did they have people working for them? Were they hard to bend, go against, kill in some cases? And weak being, were they easily manipulated, were they taken advantage of often? So, and then again, if the character is heavily sexualized, if they're displayed in a sexual act or wearing provocative clothing, I kind of looked into that. So my findings for this, I apologize, I cannot open the spreadsheet here, were really interesting. I think one of the most interesting things was it was really close as far as sexualization of characters between males and females. 43% of the females in the show were hypersexualized and shown wearing provocative clothing, and 39% of the males were actually hypersexualized and shown in provocative clothing. Even a lot of the males in the show were taken advantage of by the female characters and victimized almost in some cases. So this is really interesting to see because we see males in the roles of dominant, and to see the females as the dominant force was really interesting. 49% of the females in roles of power were considered bad, so that wasn't really surprising because a lot of this revolves around witches and things like that, so understandable why. But there were more females in roles of power than males, significantly more. And like I said, the females and males were kind of both sexualized pretty equally to each other. So that was really interesting to see. So these were just some of the findings. So you might wonder why this matters. And it matters because women are so often represented as damsel in distress, slut, sex toy, and the horror genres, especially horror movies. I mean, the first person that dies or gets attacked is always the slut or the girl who has sex. And American Horror Story shows multiple women in positions of power. And they even live if they've had sex. And it's amazing because we just don't see that in horror movies because there's such a clear formula for how it works. So, although many of the characters are hypersexualized, a lot of the times the women characters are hypersexualized is when they're using their sexuality almost as a means of gaining power. I think that a lot of the women in the show know that their sexuality can be a way to manipulate men and make them do what they want in the show, and they use it to their advantage. And I guess that's what happens when guys focus solely on a pretty face and a nice body, is that it's easy for women to kind of manipulate them using that, and use their brain as well to kind of overtake them. So it kind of shifts the dynamics of women in television being there solely for men's entertainment, and shows that women are powerful and they're a force to be reckoned with, and they're not just there to wear itty-bitty clothing and kind of be almost like a decoration. It shows that these women, you don't want to mess with them, and they can be powerful, and they can, do crazy things and, take over society. So what this means for television is, like I said, powerful female characters offer more than just a body to stare at, and it's successful. Like, this show is bringing in viewers, it's winning awards, Emmys, Golden Globe Awards. It's a successful formula, and this is awesome because it's drawing in an audience, and it's showing, and maybe even other shows will see this and see how successful it is and say, hey, maybe I should actually think about getting a female protagonist in my show. And that's awesome because with that domino effect, we're going to maybe see more females in roles of power, and they'll get to play more than the sex toy or the sidekick. And it might switch up the horror genre, and maybe the girl who has sex will live, or maybe even she'll be the slasher, and she'll be, the person that everyone's afraid of. So what I kind of want to do, if given the proper funding and resources, is to look at other primetime television shows, Modern Family, Game of Thrones, um, Big Bang Theory, and kind of see if we're seeing the same thing. Because the issue here is a lot of the studies that are done on content in media and television shows in general is from the 1980s and the 1990s. And there's been such a switch in societal norms and values um, since then that it would be cool to see if maybe the statistics change and switch, and maybe American Horror Story isn't the only show that's doing this, but it would be cool to be able to kind of look at it and see, because media and television has such a strong influence, especially on children, teenagers, um, how they view society, and it's such a huge influence. And to kind of look into this would be really, I think, would be really important. And as a communications major, that is kind of something that I deal with every day, and something that I'm really passionate about. And to kind of tie it to, how women are treated in society, and maybe seeing, women in power roles and women being treated with respect, and as equals to men in media, it might just rub off on society and not be considered such a crazy thing. So I will end it with this. This is Jessica Lange in season 2 of American Horror Story Asylum, where she plays the head nun. And she said, "Let me give you fair warning. I'll always win against the patriarchal male." And I think that's really, it says a lot for the tone of the show. And, it's kind of breaking down the patriarchy, and that women are rising to the occasion and they're given a chance. So I would really like to further my research by looking at other television shows and hoping that maybe it's not just this alone, and or if anything, it's having influence on future shows to come. So thank you very much.